Hello and welcome to Atomic Facepalm. This is Chris by myself today, and on Played in Full, I review Hollow Knight. Hello and thank you for tuning into the channel. That was awful. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. And if you're new to the channel, we do reviews like this, typically more often than not. However, this game took me 40 plus hours to beat, so this one was a little scattered. If you'd like to leave a comment, you can do that. Talk to us below. Let us know what you think of games that we're about to get into, such as this one. So, jumping right into it. Hollow Knight is an indie game that came out 2 months ago. Was it 2 months ago? Something like 2 months ago. 2 months ago-ish, a while ago. And it only costs 15 bucks on Steam. It is also available on Linux, Unix, and oddly enough, the Nintendo Switch. But not PlayStation 4 and not Xbox. So even though I have one of these, you can't actually play it on the Xbox. Go figure. Speaking of one of these, you will absolutely, positively want a gamepad to play this game. You can play it using the keyboard and mouse, but that's kind of like saying you could play a first-person shooter with a blindfold on and, I don't know, a keyboard with no keys on it. It's possible, but it wouldn't do very well. So, it's developed by a very, very tiny indie studio. Team Cherry consists of something like 4 people. Really as small as you can get. No one expected anything out of this game that I can tell. There wasn't much marketing. It wasn't really on Twitter or Facebook that much. It just kind of popped up. I saw it randomly on the internet from, I don't remember what site, and I said, it looks pretty cool. It has been compared to a Metroidvania game. I would argue that fact. So Metroidvania, I'm sure people are aware where it comes from, but in case not, is a combination of this game right here, Symphony of the Night, Castlevania, and Super Metroid, Metroid, and those games. The idea is you explore a map. It's pretty much freeform. There's a lot of backtracking. You get to upgrade your character and unlock certain areas. This game certainly has that, don't get me wrong. But it also has a fair amount of platforming, much like this game, ActRaiser 2, well known for being one of the hardest games on the Super Nintendo, platforming-wise. So you take this, you combine it with this, and that's kind of more like the truth. So it's like a ActRaiservania, something like that. So, platforming, tough bosses, and a few modern mechanics, such as the Dark Souls, where if you die, your soul gets unleashed, or whatever your bug soul is in this game, your shade, your spirit. You go back to a checkpoint, which are benches. You then can go try and hunt down your shadow and kill it, and you get all your money back. Money in this game is called Geo. You have one chance to do that. If you fail, you lose all of your money. Heartbreaking, because it will happen, and it'll happen a lot. So, we're going to get into the specifics now. So the plot takes place in the Hallow Nest. Not to be confused with the Hollow Nest. Hollow Knight, Hallow Nest, Hallow Knight, Hollow Nest. No, Hallow Nest, Hollow Knight. It's really just an unnamed place other than, well, I mean, it's a name, but it's very nondescript. It's kept very vague kind of on purpose. Your little guy who looks like a cute little kind of fly combined with a weird sort of ghost helmet drops down and you're just thrust into the world. It's filled with nothing but bugs and bug-like creatures. It is implied this is an ancient, decaying society with limited scope. So it's basically contained, and around it is just vast nothing. And the bugs have been dying for quite some time. From very early on, you learn that the king is no longer around. And after the king left, things literally started falling apart. And you're not really sure what to do. You just kind of start hacking and slashing and jumping around. When you start, you have a very limited arsenal. You have a little sword they call a nail. You just swipe around with it. You can swipe up, you can swipe down. You can bounce off characters by jumping and hitting them. But really that's it. You jump and you swipe. And as you go through the game, you build up your arsenal to be able to unlock certain areas. The bulk of the locations are filled, at least later on, with something called an infection. They don't go into what that is. I know what it is. I might talk about that later on when we get to spoilers. But from the onset, you sort of realize that there's something kind of nefarious behind the scenes. The bugs are, despite dying out, they're kind of upbeat and they're exploring and they're doing things like people would. You find them dotted throughout the landscape. Some are mean, some are kind of cool, some are just weird. But eventually you start to learn that other bugs, which are the enemies, act strange. And there's something behind that. There's something motivating why everyone wants to attack you and why you're seemingly invincible for the most part. So like I mentioned before, it is like Castlevania and other games, such as ActRaiser, etc. It gets a lot of inspiration, but it has one unique mechanic that is going to turn off a lot of people. Now, I will just come out right up front and say, my favorite game of the year so far by a long shot. Bree, who's off camera, could verify that just from the amount of time I've spent in it and me just having to be literally pretty much dragged away from the game. So if you hit spikes or if you hit acid or some other environmental obstruction, you don't just stay there and keep bouncing off it or it keeps hurting you over and over and then you eventually die. It hits you, you get hurt, the screen goes black, you then get pushed back to a small checkpoint. And those little checkpoints are different depending on where you are in the stages. They can be quite punishing, which means if you have a long section and you need to get through there by doing various things such as jumping and bouncing off characters or getting just the precise way to get over a certain obstacle, if you screw that up, not only does it take away a health point and you only have 5 to start with, which is rough, it then pushes you all the way back to the beginning. So that adds another layer of challenge that people are going to have a hard time getting their heads around, especially if you're not used to platforming games. Now, it's somewhat forgiving, there's a learning curve, but I felt like for the most part, through a little bit of repetition, not much, you can kind of discover how to do these puzzles. Or you'd say, oh, I just don't have the thing to do this yet, I need another upgrade. There are exceptions to that, huge exceptions later on, which again I will talk about later because they're spoilers. The map itself is absolutely enormous. I mean, when I started out, Bree and I actually started playing at the same time, and the map seemed pretty big when we started. But as we started going on and on and on, I realized, man, this thing just goes on forever, seemingly. And it's interesting because you start off in a very pale and black and white area. It looks cool. You know, it's stylized, it's cartoon, hand-drawn. You go, okay, I like it. But then it quickly goes to a very green and sort of lush and like forested environment. You're going, man, that's a big difference from where I was before. And it does that throughout the whole game seamlessly. So in other words, when you go from this sort of very sterile and dark, decaying main part, which is called Dirtmouth, and you go into the forested area, there's a nice transition. So it doesn't just shock you into going, oh, I'm suddenly in a forest now. No, it actually kind of gradually goes in. There's a little bit of foliage, and it builds up, and then you fight a little boss, and it goes into the rest of it. And man, this game is great with that. And there's so many different locations. There's one part called Kingdom's Edge, where it looks like it's snowing. It looks like, oh man, this is a cold Arctic environment. And you kind of figure out it's actually ashes from something that's been burning for quite some time. I continue on like that, and it gets creepier and creepier the further down you go. Basically, the ancient parts of the kingdom are the lowest, and the most recent parts are on the top, which kind of makes sense, especially from a bug perspective. And so when you start getting lower and lower, things start getting really, really bizarre. The enemies get more and more strange and powerful. It gets harder to see, and just everything overall just ramps up the difficulty. But it's neat because you always kind of want to go lower. You want to sort of figure out what the king was doing, why you're here, why all these bugs are going crazy, why are they more powerful at the bottom, and you do get to kind of figure that out. But I will go ahead and say this game does not hold your hand in the slightest. This is old school gaming at its finest. If you grew up in the 90s and 80s where you bought a game and there weren't any such things as tutorials, you just kind of had to learn how to play it. This is what this game is. They don't tell you anything. And I mean nothing. It's implied you can sit on the bench and save it. It's implied that if you die, you go back to the bench, but you don't know until it happens. And so much of this game is you going back all throughout this map, back and forth, talking, trying to kind of wrap your head around it. This is a game where you're going to need to use a strategy guide. And I would say I encourage people to do that. I had to. It doesn't spoil it because usually the strategy guides that I read were good about just kind of giving you a hint in the right direction. And if you want to spoil it, you certainly can. But yeah, it's really a game about figuring out the dynamics, figuring out the mechanics, and then going, oh, that's cool. Okay, I get it now. And that goes pretty much to the very end. And the same goes with boss fights too. There are a lot of boss fights in this game. And there are tons of enemies, by the way. I would say 80, 85, something around that number, each of them unique. But the boss fights, while extremely tough for the most part, there are some easy ones and some harder ones, but you really kind of figure out their pattern. There are multiple ways to beat them. some casting spells or being very quick and hopping around them, or just trying to tank them and bash away at them with an overpowered weapon if you have it. Really, again, it goes back to that you just have to learn. You know, this is not a game where you're going to get to a boss the first time and beat him. It's just not going to happen. Maybe some people do, they're really talented people. For the most part, no. You got to figure it out. I mentioned health earlier, and I want to mention it again. You have 5 little mask tokens. Usual enemies, when they hit you, take away one of those mask tokens, and you have maybe a second or two of invulnerability before you can get hit again. It's very easy to bump into an enemy and then get ricocheted back into another enemy or an environment or something. So you can be losing 2 or 3 health tokens very, very quickly. It makes it tough because, again, this is a hard game. You can regenerate your health if you have enough magic, and you get magic called soul by just hitting guys, or you find little things scattered throughout the environment that can give you soul. And you have an option. You can cast spells with it, or you can use it to continually regenerate health. But even that's not easy, because your little dude stays in one place. You can't move him, with some exceptions later on. And then you have to wait a few seconds for him to kind of go, and then you get your health back. So even regenerating health is not a guarantee, especially if the map is filled with hectic monsters, you're in a boss battle, or just somewhere that's not conducive to staying in one place and healing up. So again, this is a game where you will die, and you will die often. And man, it can be absolutely heart-rending sometimes. And again, I'm going to put this out there. I love this game to death. I really do. But I have to say, the difficulty will turn people off. This is a game that some people just are not going to be able to play. It's too tough. It's too much of a learning curve. So if you're someone that really doesn't play platformers and you're going this going, oh man, it'd be a cool adventure game. I'm sure it's fun. It'll drive you insane. It's too much. Throughout the game, I suggested earlier you get upgrades, and that is the case. They call them charms in this game. You have a certain amount of charm notches, and you can then fill those notches with various charms that require maybe 1 notch, 2 notches, or 3 notches. For example, there's one that makes your sword longer, takes up a couple notches. There are some that make your spells more powerful. There are some that give you various other abilities, like eventually I said you could get one that you can move around when you heal, albeit slowly. There's one where when you heal, it shoots out a spore cloud of mushrooms and it hurts people. And there's something like 45 of them total. And man, they do a really good job. No matter how you explore, you always feel like you have not quite enough, but at the same time, it's not like you have like too many. It's that perfect balance. And there are so many of them you could spend forever, like I did. I'm a collector and I'm a completionist, so I wanted to get them all. And it becomes kind of a Pokemon minigame of collecting these things, and you get them different ways. Beating bosses, finding secret areas, and there are tons and tons of secret areas in this game. So plenty of those to go around. In addition to those, there's also passive upgrades. So let's say you're going through the map and you stumble across something called Pale Ore. You eventually figure out you can use that to upgrade your nail, again, which is just a sword. And so if you collect enough of them, you can really buff up your melee power like I did. And if you want, you can kind of ignore your spells. But there's also upgrades that can give you the ability to store more soul, giving you more healing and more access to spells. There's one that gives you a double jump. There's one that lets you kind of dash quickly. There's one that lets you dash through enemies, etc. So not only are you managing your charms, you also have these things working in the background as well. One of the controversial parts of this game that I've seen, now there haven't been too many reviews, honestly. Again, a very low-key game, possibly because of the length, possibly because of the challenge, maybe a lack of marketing, I'm not sure. But one thing a lot of people don't like, I personally didn't mind it at all and I liked it, was your map doesn't auto-update. Now again, in this game, and in Super Metroid and other games like that, when you go through, your map populates as you explore new rooms. Not in this game. In this game, you have to not only find a map maker who's hidden and kind of tough to get to parts in certain areas. You can hear him singing and you can kind of follow those papers to get to him, but you still have to find him. Then when you do find him, you've got to pay for a map. That's the 2-step process. There's a 3rd step that goes with that. So you've got to buy a quill, an ink pen. That's a little charm slot. I mean, it doesn't take up a charm, but it's something you have to buy at the very beginning. So you buy that, you go find the map maker in all the various different sections in the game, you pay the geo, then you have to go rest at a bench, and only then will it pull up your progress. And then if you get back up and explore another section, you've got to go back to another bench and sit there, and then it will show you where you are. And again, people really, really hated this. I didn't mind it at all. I actually really liked it. It makes you feel like you don't know where you are. It makes you feel lost and you have to explore. And there's that added layer of tension. I love that. And there were some times where I was like, man, I don't want to die, because if I die, I'm going to lose this geo. I need to buy this map. It just really stresses you out in the best ways possible. So I actually enjoyed it. There's also a fast travel system people said was too far apart. Again, I didn't have that opinion. Bree is nodding her head yes in the background. Again, I've seen this a lot. A lot of people said that it needs more fast travel points. It needs better accessibility. I thought it was fine. I really did. Maybe I could have used 1 or 2 more. For the most part, I had no problem. At one point, you even unlock a tram system that goes to like the kind of lower depths, which gives you extra. And it's funny because the tram system failed and the fast traveling is on this back of like a big giant bug, and he hates the tram system. And it's little unique touches like that I really enjoy. All these little backstories built into the game. I'm gonna go into pluses and minuses now. I'm gonna go over this briefly, spoiler free. And then after I get to my overall just like yeah and no's, then I'm gonna get into spoilers, because I feel like for me to give you an accurate review of this game, I need to discuss 2 major spoilers. So before we do that, let's go over the overall pluses and minuses, in my opinion. The loads and loads of secrets, loved it. So many secrets. There were times where I thought I had everything, and then I go back to an area and I go, oh man, I forgot about that part. Or I have this new power now, so I can kind of explore it. Oh, cool, I found this new boss. Or, whoa, man, there's this new area that just has this random NPC and he just talks to you. Not every secret has an amazing item, but it's always interesting. Whether it's a piece of lore or just a really cool area. Like there's this one called the Blue Lake. It's very vast, and these little flying guys going over it. Stuff like that is amazing. And you can play this game forever, and you probably, oh man, it would take hours, probably 80 hours to uncover every secret. Incredible value. So for $15, you're getting a 40+ hour game with a lot of replayability. That's rare these days. It really is. The amount of enemies that you fight and the amount of NPCs is also incredibly impressive, to the point where it sort of outdoes a lot of AAA games when it comes to the quality and the subtle writing and the various like ticks and how the characters behave, and literal ticks in some parts. Zing! So again, the attention to detail when it came to the writing and the background and the characters, just phenomenal. It's one of the most inventive and interesting worlds I can think of. It's not A Bug's Life. I mean, it is, but it's not like the movie. This is a very dark and weird approach to like what it'd be like living in a bug kingdom. You've got giant, terrifying beetles. You have tiny little ants. You've got everything you can imagine. They all interact in various ways. So I love that environment. I love how you can have an area, like I said in the beginning, very black and white, and all of a sudden it goes into this lush green, fertile area. That stuff is amazing. So, pluses, let's go for the minuses. And there are a few. One of the biggest minuses, like I said, is it's too damn hard. It really is. There's gonna be people who just, even if you're using, and I gotta say, this wireless gamepad, despite being impossible to set up, by the way, Windows 10, this was not fun. So despite that, pretty responsive overall. There were a few times where I'd be playing and it would drop out, and I've got to ding it for that. I thought it was my wireless controller. I actually plugged in my other wired Xbox controller, and I figured out it had the exact same tendencies to do that. So that doesn't seem like much, but when you're in a boss battle, you've got one little token of health left, you need to hit him one more time, you go to slam that button and you just stand there and you get killed. Beyond frustrating. It's hard enough as it is. Adding lost button presses and certain movements don't go a certain way, that's rough, guys. That's rough. I hope that gets patched at some point. The other issue I have is there are a few optional bosses called dream bosses. Well, not the dream lords themselves, but they're like, they're kind of dreams or dead characters you can fight. You don't have to, I get that. However, if you want to get the good ending, you have to start beating these guys to get a certain amount of soul. We'll talk about that in more detail soon. But some of these guys are so goddamn hard. I play these games. I am pretty good at platformers. There was one time where I fought the failed champion 50+ times. I was ready to cry. It was bad. I fought him so many times, I was convinced I couldn't beat him. I eventually did. Really, I don't feel like I had a skill. I kind of just got lucky. I'd look up videos specifically how to do it, how to load out my charms. That took it away from me. So while some of those are, yes, technically optional, but hell, on that logic, the whole game is optional. Do you have to explore? Do you have to kill anything? Do you have to press start? Do you have to install it to begin with? No, all of that's optional. No, I don't buy that argument. If you're gonna put stuff in the game, even if it's optional, it has to be realistic and it has to flow. with the rest of the game. When you're playing a game that has difficulty here, and then you fight a boss, it's way up here, it's jarring and weird, and it's not fun. I will say I think it needs more benches. I think the fast travel system is okay. I think that for the most part, things are evenly spaced out. It needs more benches. There were times where there'd be like 3 close together, and you're like, well, why are these so close? That's kind of dumb. And there'd be other times you can't find one to save your life. I think it would have benefited from maybe a better dispersal system. A minor complaint, but enough to be annoying at times. So, there are my basic pluses and minuses. If you don't want to know anything about spoilers, and you're just looking for my thumbs up or thumbs down, oh my God, yes. I wish everyone would play this game. I know it's not for everybody, so I'm going to be hypocritical here. I want everybody to play it, knowing that not everybody can play it. There you go, I'm saying it. It's just so good. It's everything that I love about games. It's cool, it's unique, it's indie, it's small, it makes you feel, you get frustrated, you get happy. It feels like just everything that I want a game to be. So yes, a resounding 100%. Go buy the game. Even just try it out. Please do it for me. Play it. It's so good. So good. If you're still here, it's because you're willing to listen to spoilers. So, you have been warned. Spoilers! And here they come. Now, this is me for both good and bad parts. 1, multiple endings. Awesome. There are, I believe, 3 endings and kind of 1 sort of bonus ending. The basic ending is you go through it. You don't get the Void Heart. You don't collect the 2 white seals. You don't go into the White Palace, which I'll talk about right now. So, multiple endings, awesome, love it. The White Palace, what the fuck were you guys thinking putting this in the game? This is ridiculous. I don't know, so again, this is where people are like, you don't have to go to the White Palace, it's optional, stop complaining. It's not optional if you want to get a good ending. The only way to get the ending, the 2 endings that are pretty decent, you have to go to the White Palace and you have to beat it. It's a palace in a dream world where the king is. It's supposed to be inside the king's dead mind, and it's filled with buzzsaws. Now, I get what they were doing. It's an homage to Super Meat Boy. This game is not Super Meat Boy. So you're playing through this whole game where it's pretty challenging platforming, but it's also a little forgiving. You don't have to be a master at platforming to play the game. When you go to the White Palace, you absolutely do. It is the most ridiculous. I have not been that angry at a game. Not fun angry, not like, oh man, this is good, this is challenging. No, outright, like, this is fucking impossible. So you get into this, and then, like I was talking about before, where when you hit something and it sends you back to a checkpoint, these are ridiculously long checkpoints. And with these saw blades, they hit you and they knock you back, takes away a health. And all of a sudden you're knocked into another saw blade, and you fall down. So it's like you lose half your health. There are charms, I get it. I had to equip a certain charm to kind of heal back my health automatically. Not everyone's going to have that charm. I just happened to find it before I got to the White Palace. God help you if you don't have the Hive Blood charm and you're trying to go through this palace. Not only does it reset you to the checkpoints, there is a bench. If you get to the very end of these freaking impossible challenges and you lose all your health, it sends you all the way back to the beginning. I couldn't have done it. If I didn't have the Hive Blood charm, I would not have beat the first part. So when you're going through, you have to have pixel perfect jumps. They have to be precise. There are multiple ways to do it, so I heard. I couldn't do it. If you screw up, you're stuck in one area, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The same damn thing, over and over and over. It's not like the rest of the game where you get to go, you're like, you know what, this part's tough. I'm gonna just go explore the rest of the map. I'll come back here, I'll get something else, I'll do something different. I'm just gonna take a break. No, you're stuck here. If you wanna go forward, you gotta do it over and over for hours and hours. That shit ain't fun. Maybe it's fun for some people, I hated it. And it only gets harder and harder. It's not like the White Palace is tiny. I probably spent, 4 hours in it. And that was not 4 hours of fun. That was 4 hours I wanted to just break my computer in half. And people are like, oh, didn't you feel good when you finished it? Yeah, I guess. I mean, in the sense you feel good after a prison sentence is over. So I'll try and balance things out. I obviously hated that part. What I did like is figuring out what the infection is. Eventually you learn that the infection is actually an ancient entity called the Radiance. It's implied that it's a god or some type of just really high-powered sentient virus. And it took over the king and he killed himself. And then they started having to create dream warriors, which would contain the Radiance inside what they call the black egg. And it turns out you're not even a Hollow Knight, by the way. That's the final boss, which is another cool reveal. You are the perfect vessel. There have been like millions of vessels before you, which you find in one of the very coolest parts of the game when you're in the void. You know, it's like an anagram for hell. Not anagram. It's like analogous to hell. So then when you are this perfect vessel, your idea is they created you and they sacrificed all the bugs to create you so you could kind of go back, fight this thing, and then free the king. Rescuing the grubs. Oh my god, that's one of my favorite parts of the game. So you're going through and there's these little grubs that are caught in jars and they're hidden throughout the whole game, and you can shout at the jars, they escape, they go like, and they, you know, they're all like cute and they try and hug you and then leave, and you can then go back to like the father of the grubs and he gives you various items. That was really, really fun. One of the best side quests. Like when there was a really hard part, aside from the White Palace, damn you, I could go and just try and find grubs, and it was so fun. So props to them for putting that in there. Great distraction. Okay, and my final complaint, which is much like the White Palace, is if you want to get the best ending in the game, and I realize people are going to say, well, you don't have to. I get that you don't have to, but it's in there. So in order to do that, you've got to go through all these steps, and you get to the Hollow Knight. And the Hollow Knight actually isn't that tough. You can beat him pretty quickly with certain charms, but it takes a lot of time. And so you go through, you beat him. One of your little friends, who becomes a friend, initially she's an enemy, she stabs him. You then hit him with the Dream Nail, which is how the Dream Nail is like this ethereal version of your weapon you can hit guys with, and then you can enter into their minds. Or if they're dead, you can enter into their spirit minds. So you get inside the Hollow Knight. You then fight the Radiance itself. You fight a god. You get crushed by this thing. It was by far the hardest part of the damn game. And you're going, oh, it's the final boss. It should be hard. Yeah, it should be hard, but it shouldn't be tear-inducing, punch yourself in the face, I want to kill everything and quit this game hard. No, it shouldn't be like that. If I wasn't reviewing this game, I don't know if I would have kept going. I really don't. I was damn near to the point where I was just going to say fuck it and just review the game and not get the best ending. I didn't think I could do it. I really didn't. Again, I'm pretty good at these games. The final boss, the Radiance, takes away 2 health every time he hits you. He does all these randomized attacks that are almost impossible to dodge unless you're like a professional gamer. And unless you have a very specific loadout, which eventually I figured out how to do through a lot of research and a lot of repetition, I don't know how you beat him. I really don't. I know there are people, there's those 10%ers out there who just can do this stuff in their sleep, but it's unfair to say the majority of the people playing this game have that ability. It's just not feasible. So not only is the final boss that hard, there are 3 different sections. The second part is a platforming kind of idea where you have to fight him on platforms. It's even harder. And then if you die, you go all the way back and you gotta fight the Hollow Knight all over again and then get back to the Radiance. I did that, no joke, probably like 50 to 60 times. And again, yeah, it felt good to beat him. I get it, euphoria. But you can feel that euphoria from surviving a life-threatening surgery. You can feel that euphoria from almost falling off a cliff and a friend rescuing you. It doesn't mean you want to do it. It doesn't mean it's fun. It's a weird misstep for me. You have these really hard parts that just feel so out of place with the White Palace and with the final boss and the Radiance. I don't understand. Team Cherry, you made an amazing game. One of the best games I can think of in the last few years. You have a winner with Hollow Knight. So there you have it, guys. Thank you for tuning in to this Played in Full review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and subscribe. We'd love that. Or you can leave a comment or do both. And you can always find myself and Bree, who is off camera. We usually do weekly news segments. We will sometimes do games reviewed together. So thank you again. Good luck and have fun.